Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for convenience, truth telling, and myth busting. We continue our All Things Africa edition. We continue our series across the continent, looking at the history and current affairs of each African country and the respective regions they come from. And I can't believe it, but we are in our final chapters of this incredible series. We will now be looking at a few of the island nations of Africa. And I apologize that we've been a bit behind schedule due to travels, long-term illnesses I've been struggling with and whatnot. But anywho, tonight on the show, we look at the history and current affairs of the Comoros Islands, and who better to teach us about this nation or any African nation than our regular historical guide, our tour guide, Abayomi Azikiwe of Pan-African Newswire and Black Agenda Reports. Abayomi is a longtime historian, journalist, longtime leftist activist, Pan-Africanist leftist who does many solidarity work with Africa and other nations targeted by imperialism. And don't forget, folks, to share One Plus One widely. Facebook sometimes blocks me from sharing or shadow bans me. So it's deeply appreciated, folks. Share widely. It's our only way of growing an audience and overcoming the dominance of corporate media, Western state media, and the avalanche of far-right media that people are indoctrinated by. So again, please share widely. Please donate to our PayPal. If you want to donate another way, then get in touch with me at Youri at Gmail, and please do help our dear friend Chris Richards, the eclectic radical facing unemployment, by supporting him at his Patreon, his Substack, and share his content widely. And now, on to the topic at hand. So, Abayomi, as always, tell us what were the Comoros Islands like before French colonization? Then how did it become a French colony? And what were the conditions of the masses like when France formerly colonized the islands?
Well, the Union of Comoros, as it is called officially, came into existence as an independent state in 1975. It had a long history. It's a series of islands located off the coast of the southeast of the African continent. It's traced back well over 1,500 years in terms of documented history. It is considered an archipelago that has been historically volcanic. So you have a series of islands that are scattered within what is known as the Indian Ocean. Many of the people who were there came from various geopolitical backgrounds. There's the Austronesian people, who are a combination of people from various South Pacific, Asian nation states and territories. The indigenous African people are also a major part of the demographic makeup of the Union of Comoros. There's also an intervention by the Arab populations that came during the period after the 7th century with the rise of Islam. Also, Omanis, people who came from the West Asian state of Oman, also had a base there as well. This developed over centuries between the 7th century up into the 15th century. It's largely people from the Asia Pacific region, Africa, the Arabs, some people from Persia, as well as the Omani Arabs. After that, there was an intervention by Portugal. The Portuguese, of course, being one of the earliest European colonial powers, along with Spain. Portugal traveled far south in terms of East Africa, the East African coastline. They were in Mozambique, in the area now known as Tanzania and Zanzibar, and other islands off the coast of East Africa. Then after the Portuguese, there was the intervention of the British, which had some involvement there as well. And then, of course, France, which by the mid to late 19th century, they became the dominant European colonial power. Now, they say that France purchased at least some of these islands, Mayotte or Mayotte, which still remains a French overseas territory or French department. In actuality, it's a French colony. It was set up as a slave outpost during the 19th century and even before. So they still remain under the domination of French imperialism. They say that the people in Mayotte voted as late as 2011 to remain part of France. But the reality is that the people there are heavily oppressed, exploited, and impoverished. And this has impacted the other islands in the Union of Comoros. Today, the Union of Comoros is a member of the Arab League, the African Union, and other international organizations, including the Islamic Organization of Islamic Conference. So it's has a lot of international presence, even though the population there is less than 1 million, even today. So that's some background about the Union of Comoros. It has been a colony of France. Some of it is still under the French domination. And what is quite interesting about France is that they promote themselves as being liberal, as being friends of African people and other oppressed people, yet they're still seeking to dominate huge swaths of territory throughout Africa and also throughout certain parts of Asia as well. For example, New Caledonia, which is in the South Pacific. The indigenous people call it Kanak, and they call themselves the Kanaki people. But there have been uprisings there even over the last 5 to 10 years in the South Pacific, as well as in Mayotte. And the unrest usually parallels unrest related to what is going on inside the French government and the French political and economic system. So yes, that is a brief history of the Union of Comoros. Now, Mayotte, even to this day, is not a part of the Union of Comoros. They're a standalone department which is affiliated and administered by the French Republic. But the others, islands and territories in the Union of Comoros are considered independent, even though their history, and we'll get into this later, is clearly related to imperialist intervention and also French imperialist domination.
Exactly, and that's probably a perfect segue. And in fact, I'm really glad you mentioned France's overseas territory colony of New Caledonia, because that and what you mentioned already with slavery. That's already a perfect idea for people to understand what the conditions were like for the Comoros people when France colonized them. And like what you mentioned with New Caledonia and with the island that should be part of the Comoros island, but it's just France's colony. It's a perfect window into how France, it's a perfect window into the ongoing colonization, what some would call a neo-colonialism that France has with the Comoros Islands. So that's a perfect segue to this question, which is, when the islands gained their independence, was it one of violent struggle or a largely peaceful transfer of power?
Well, the whole issue of peaceful transfer of power is quite dubious because on the one hand, you always had resistance against, even back during the period of Portuguese intervention, starting in the late 15th and early 16th century. There was pushback on the part of indigenous groupings and in combination with the Islamic, Arab, and Omani and Persian population groups there. So there was always resistance to European domination. Later, when France became dominant, there was also resistance against France as well. So the country became independent in 1975, and that ushered in a whole new period of political instability in the Union in Comoros. There were numerous coups d'etats that took place, and we can talk about that as well. Some of the early leaders in the country were considered national liberation leaders and fighters, but at the same time, they had very limited authority due to the ongoing domination by France. So I think this is very, very important that we understand what has happened there particularly since 1975.
Perfect. Actually, that's a perfect segue. And I've had to, prepared a lot of questions on the Comoros Islands, and I've had to sort of sandwich a lot of the a lot of
Well, there's
questions.
been
So
20 attempted coups, either coups or attempted coups, since 1975. So we're talking about
exactly.
51 years of political instability. The first president, Ahmed Abdallah,
Yeah.
was, a prominent figure. Nonetheless, he was overthrown not too long after he took power in 1975.
All right. So I apologize in advance to both Abayomi and the audience. I've had to sandwich a lot of the questions together. So here it goes. So tell
You
us
have no
about
choice.
so tell us exactly. Exactly. So tell us about the socio-economic legacy regarding Ahmed Abdallah, who was in office the 6th of July, 1975 to August the 3rd, 1975. Now, he was part of the CDU, the Comoran Democratic Union. Funnily enough, very little information about their ideology and history on Wikipedia. Then, after his time in office, the country was governed by Syed Mohammed Jafar and his Democratic Rally for the Comorian people. Also, little to no information of them on English Wikipedia. And he governed from the 3rd of August, 1975 to the 3rd of January, 1976, followed by Ali Solih, apologies if I'm not saying his name correctly, of the same party, and he was in office for only 2 years, the 3rd of January 1976 to the 13th of May 1978, and then his successor, who only governed for 10 days, was Syed Athmwani, an independent, May 13th to May 23rd, 1978. So, Abayomi, what were the socioeconomic legacies of each of these men, if there's any to even speak of?
Yeah, well, because of the divided character of the Comoros Islands, there's been factionalism, and that has spilled over into the administrative apparatus of the independent state. What has happened is that there's been numerous coups. A lot of them are military in their orientation. A lot of the people who were political leaders inside the country had a background with French military and French police training in that particular regard. So we have to look at the politics of the Comoros in relationship to repeated military interventions in their internal affairs. Also, France maintained an extreme, enormous amount of political power in the country. And that came out, of course, with the role of Bob Denard, who was a French mercenary in essence. His background goes all the way back to the French attempt to maintain colonial control of Vietnam during the post-World War II period. The war in 1954, where France was defeated at Dien Bien Phu. Also, later on, Denard was involved in other activities. For example, during the anti-colonial war in Algeria, in North Africa, he fought on the side of the French to maintain colonial control of Algeria by Paris. So he winds up having a role in Comoros. So he had to be working on behalf of the French government. And he, in fact, reinstalled Ahmed Abdallah in later years.
Yeah.
Even though Abdallah was supposedly an independence leader, and when he took power again after the initial coup d'etat, he had very little power. And he was heavily backed by Bob Denard. So this is the reality of the situation. And Denard has been involved in other mercenary expeditions. For example, in what's today called the Democratic Republic of Congo, he was there during the early 1960s fighting to safeguard and promote people such as Moise Tshombe and other counter-revolutionary leaders who were instrumental in the overthrow of Patrice Lumumba. And so he's a mercenary. He works on behalf of French interests, and he backed, several political leaders in the Comoros Islands.
Exactly, and when and so far, we've not gotten to him yet, but and so far, long story short, but all of these leaders have been right leaning. But even when they try to make some concessions to the working class masses, poof, they get overthrown in the French-backed coup. And we now enter this period of Comoros when the country became the Federal Islamic Republic of Comoros, and it was known and governed like that from 1978 to 2001. You already talked about how that French mercenary and imperialist mobster goon that helped prop up Ahmed Abdullah first into a power sharing arrangement with Mohammed Ahmed from May 23rd to October 3rd, 1978, under the Comoran Democratic Union. And then when it was just Ahmed Abdullah governing, he governed from October 3rd, 1978 to November 26th, 1989, acting as an acting president, and then formally came Syed Mohammed Djar. He governed the island from November 27th, 1989 to September 29th, 1995. And he was first part of the CDU, then was part of another party, the Comoran Union for Progress. All of these governments, from the research I've done, govern from the right wing to the far right. Yet the only thing Wikipedia has regarding their ideology was nationalism was their ideology. So what were the socioeconomic legacies of all of these gentlemen during this period of the Comoros Islands?
The country has remained over the last 51 years an undeveloped state. There's not a lot of economic development taking place inside the country. It still remains dependent on the former French colonialists, and the poverty rate is extremely high, and the question of literacy and political involvement remains extremely low. So yes, it still is a highly underdeveloped state, heavily impoverished, and through the successive governments, they have not been able to dig themselves out of perpetual underdevelopment.
And then now, and then this is where Comoros' government gets a little more shaky. The country found itself under military rule from October the 2nd, 1995 until 1996. Kambo Ayuba governed from October the 2nd to the 5th of 1905. And then Mohammed Taki Abdul Karim and Syed Ali Kamal governed, all members of the National Union of Democracy and a Party of Unity and Fraternity of the Islands. Then all of them were replaced by interim president Kabi Ali Yakruto Mohammed of the Rally for Democracy and Renewal, who was in charge 5th of October 1995 till the 26th of January 1996. And then this man was supportive, I believe, of Syed Mohammed Djar. He makes a political comeback and comes back into office under the same party, the Rally for Democracy and Renewal, from the 26th of January 1996 to the 25th of March 1996, followed by Mohammed Taki Abdul Karim of the same party, and then he's replaced by an interim president, Tajani Masuni, in independent from November the 9th, 1996 till April the 30th, 1999. And then his term also ends with in a military coup. And then we have Colonel Azil Azumani. Now, before we talk about Colonel Azil, do tell us about the socio-economic legacies of all of these leaders I asked of, and if the social mobility, life expectancy, child mortality, and other important social indicators improved or remained largely stagnant, or got worse? Very curious.
Yeah, it remained heavily stagnant during that period, and it still does. So when Colonel Azali Assoumani came to power in 1999, after that, of course, he became a dominant figure in the Union of Comoros politics and government. And even today, he is considered the head of state in the country. But no, there was no real advancement in terms of economic development. And even in terms of political development, uh, there was a lot of factionalism that took place, military interference in political affairs, and that has characterized the Union of Comoros all the way up until this date.
Exactly. From April the 30th, 1999 till December 23rd, 2001. And then from December 23rd, 2001 to January 21st, 2002, Comoros was governed by the military led by Colonel Azil Azumani. And then civilian rule was restored in the country, and then they were governed by Hamad Mahdi of the Republican Party. They don't even have a Wikipedia page, and his own bio didn't even indicate if he governed from the left or the right or even in between, but it mostly governed from the soft right to far right, but it's all far right when it comes to African, Latin American, and Asian affairs, and even West Asian affairs. And he was only in power for a few months from January the 21st, 2002 to May 26, 2002. And then the country was ruled by Azil Azumani again from May 26, 2002 to May 26, 2006. This time he led a party called the Convention for the Renewal of Comoros, which according to Wikipedia says that they're center-left, a social democratic party, a party that believes in democratic socialism. Now tell us about this brief period. Tell us about the socio-economic legacy and more. If social mobility, life expectancy, child mortality, and other social indicators remain improved or remain largely stagnant and then continue to get worse. I'm curious.
Yeah, in my view, it was largely stagnant. There was no real improvement, very little mass participation in internal politics. And that has been the situation during the whole period of Assoumani's governance, his governance in the Union of Comoros. But I believe that there's still a struggle going on over Mayotte, and the Union of Comoros still claims sovereignty over Mayotte. And despite the fact that that is the situation, France, which is a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, has vetoed several resolutions calling for the bringing of Mayotte into the Union of Comoros. But France has vetoed all of those resolutions, and the resolutions have been submitted by the United Nations as well as the African Union. So France is definitely committed to maintaining its colonial outpost in Africa as well as in the South Pacific, and also in the Caribbean. They still have colonies as well in the Caribbean, like Martinique, for example, is a good example of that.
Yes, the country that Franz Fanon hails from, in fact. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's been numerous uprisings in those states, general strikes, yet they have not led to national independence in those countries. And that's the same situation in Mayotte, as well as in Kanak, the New Caledonia in the South Pacific.
And then during this period, Comoros was then ruled by an independent politician, Ahmed Sabi, from the 26th of May 2006 to the 26th of May 2011. And then Ikilu Juhini, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, of the Babuab movement from the 26th of May 2011 to the 26th of May 2016. What is their socioeconomic legacy, if there's any to even say, regarding social mobility, life expectancy, child mortality, and other social indicators? Improvement or still stagnant and continuously getting worse?
Yeah, I would say largely stagnant. that there has not been any qualitative improvement as it relates to economic resources inside the country, and also the per capita income of the majority of the people in the Union of Comoros. So it has largely remained stagnant.
And now the final period of Comoros is the following. So Azil Azumani makes yet another comeback, and he governs from the 26th of May 2016 to the 13th of February 2019. And then Mustadroni Abdu of the same party, the convention for the renewal of Comoros, governs from the 13th of February 2019 to the 3rd of April 2019. And then once more, Azil Azumani comes back into office, and he's president of the Comoros from April the 3rd, 2019 to the very present. Now, before answering how Azil is currently faring, what can you say about the socio-economic legacy of his predecessors? And then how is the current state of affairs for the majority working class and desolate poor in the country?
Pretty much the same. There hasn't been any real uh, political or economic development inside the Union of Comoros. They have maintained their international affiliations, whether it's related to the African Union, the Arab League of Arab States, and of course the Organization of Islamic Conference and others. But no, there hasn't been any fundamental change in the socioeconomic conditions of the masses inside the country. The population still remains less than 1 million people. So yes, other than their international affiliations, domestically they have remained fairly stagnant.
And during the Cold War, I think we accidentally we accidentally skipped an important figure, in between the very, unstable, chaotic history that is Comoros, which we will return back to that historical figure in Comoros before it became, an Islamic republic. But during the Cold War, was Comoros largely aligned with France and its allies like West Germany, Britain, the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and what later became the European Union? Or were they aligned with the Soviet Union, the Eastern European Communist Bloc, Cuba, Vietnam? Or were they non aligned but leaned more towards the West, or forcibly lean towards the Western Imperial Alliance?
Yeah, I would say the Western Imperialist Alliance. If you look at, for example, the national currency, which is largely backed by the European dollar, the euro, that is the situation. It's still a part of the Francophone community, which is the similar to what the British Commonwealth is. It is a system that promotes and maintains French dominance in the country as well as internationally. And that is the situation. Now, they did attend, the president, Assoumani, attended the Russian Africa Summit that took place 2 years ago. And so, in that sense, they are able to step out of the French sphere of influence to make contact with the Russian Federation. Russia is promoting itself as better allies to the African states, even the small African states, than what exists in regard to the United States, France, and Britain. So in that sense, one could look at that as being some semblance of independent foreign policy, yet it really doesn't go far enough at all. They are for a negotiated or diplomatic settlement to the conflict, or the war actually, between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. But beyond that, there has not been a lot of movement. And we have to take into consideration this is a highly undeveloped state, and that the population is less than 1 million people. It is dispersed across several different islands, and some are larger, some are very small. And of course, the division between the French department or French colonial territory, and the rest of the islands is also a factor in regard to its attempt to exercise any type of political independence, even on a foreign policy level.
And going back to the Comoros during the period of the Cold War, I think I think we skipped over a very important leader, uh, a very important leader in Comoros history. So before Comoros, during the period of the late '70s up until either the 1990s or the early 2000s, it was an Islamic republic, fairly theocratic, fairly repressive of women, very repressive of the working class in general. Had good relations with the Islamic Republic of Iran, but in recent years they've pivoted more and more to the Gulf states, and the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, Kuwait, and whatnot. All of them, very much aligned with the Western imperial order. Sometimes, more with France, sometimes more with Brits, and sometimes with the U.S. and Canada. And under the various regimes have been very, very repressive to the working class, secular minded folks, and whatnot. But before that, there was a very brief period where Comoros was ruled by fairly much, a communist, a flaming left winger, a Marxist Leninist, and so forth. Can you talk to us about that small period of time and the very good policies that leader was trying to advance until he was overthrown in the French-backed Western coup, and then the Comoros continued to go down a pretty, regressive, far right rabbit hole. Very curious response.
Well, yes, in the mid to late 1970s and even early 1980s, there was a period in Africa where a number of left-wing, socialist-oriented governments came to power. Some of them came out of the military, for example, in Ethiopia in 1974, where you had the Provisional Military Administrative Committee, popularly known as the DERG, headed by Mengistu Mariam. There was Mohammed Siad Barre, who had ruled in Somalia between 1969 up until the early 1990s. At one point, they were considered socialist oriented in the early phase in the mid to late 1970s. Then, of course, they flipped and became close allies of the United States under the Carter administration in the late 1980s. So a lot of the governments that came to power during that time period did look to the socialist camp for support, but they were not consistent in these efforts. So that happened in Comoros, and it happened in some other countries on the African continent.
What was the name of that leader again during that brief period of time when Comoros was a
I don't remember
communist?
the name. We have to go back and look it up.
Actually,
But
yeah. In fact, hold on one second. Actually,
yes,
before I try to find that name, do talk to us then about how much the IMF and the World Bank plays a horrific reactionary role in Comoros' socioeconomic affairs.
yeah. Well, the International Monetary Fund and the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development came out of the latter period of World War II. The Bretton Woods Conference that took place in New Hampshire in 1944 was very important. The whole idea initially was to provide resources for the rebuilding of Europe after the war. And they had the
Oh,
Marshall Plan.
one moment, Abayomi. So,
Mhm.
wait, one moment. Okay, so, folks, so the communist leader that me and Abayomi we were talking about, but we both forgot his name. So that leader was Ali Soli, and he ruled from January 1976 until he was overthrown in the French-backed military coup May 1978. And
Yeah, he was the
during
Minister of Defense. Ali, yeah, Solihi.
Yeah, exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. And and also before we return back to the IMF and the World Bank and their
Okay.
reactionary role in French affairs, very important to note this. When I was doing my research into the Comoros, using Google's AI mode, they said that the very, very brief period he was in, for the first time in Comoros' history, they actually experienced a civilizational upgrade
Hmm.
in terms of the massive nationalization that nationalization programs he was trying to do, investing a lot in the rural poverty and industrialization for for the many rural farmers that exist throughout the islands, and the Comoros to this day uh, has shocking levels of rural poverty and so forth like that. And then he also abolished grand marriage and a lot of backward stuff, which the French continued to overlook and even propped up. And that very brief period of time, the Comoros Islands actually experienced a civilizational upgrade. And then the moment he was overthrown in the French backed coup, Comoros experienced a civilizational downgrade, and all of the major social indicators that we look at in social mobility, from child mortality towards people experiencing a much better life than the previous generations, to women's rights and so forth, all went completely down the drain when France overthrew him, which I thought which I think is a very interesting thing in and of itself. So
Hmm.
now, yeah, would you like to
Yeah,
respond?
just to mention that Saeed Mohammed Jafar uh, had taken over after the initial leadership, post-independence leadership, and it was the Ali Solihi who staged a coup against the second head of state.
Yeah, so that's quite fascinating. So now, as we return back to just in general the history of Comoros and current affairs, uh, basically each of these presidents since the overthrow of Salili have adopted IMF policies and World Bank policies, structural adjustment programs. So the island of Comoros has been subjected to basically endless austerity since the late 1970s all the way up until the present. So
Mhm.
Abayomi, talk to us. Talk to us a bit more about the reactionary role the IMF and the World Bank plays in Comoros' socio-economic affairs, as well as France formally and the French bank, and how France uses the currency of Comoros. Comoros has a very reactionary currency that keeps them forever in debt to France, and always, the policies they're given is just endless, austerity and whatnot. Voodoo
Mhm.
economics, as George H.W. Bush once described Reaganomics.
Exactly. And then he became a part of it. Yeah, he
Exactly.
became a part of it because they had the Republican National Convention in 1980 in Detroit at the newly opened Renaissance Center. And that's when that phrase became quite popular. And he was saying he was against Reagan while he was running in the primary, but yet he wound up becoming the vice presidential candidate. And it was Bob Denard, the French mercenary, who was instrumental in the overthrow of Ali Solihi and the reversal of the progressive policies during that brief period of time during the late 1970s. And Denard, of course, facilitated, the downgrading of the national currency and also the destabilization of the Comoros in terms of its political status. And of course, with the return of the first head of state, um, Abdallah, uh, Abdallah really had very limited power. That Denard was actually, according to most sources, was really running the show in Comoros, and he was also involved in other destabilization efforts on the African continent. We had talked about that earlier in terms of the Democratic Republic of Congo, We talked about his involvement in other counter-revolutionary efforts in Algeria during the early 60s, fighting to maintain colonial control by France over the Algerian people, which failed. So yes, I think that these are very, very important issues to look into. And I think that Denard and subsequent leaders of the Union of Comoros have still not been able to break away from the dominance of French imperialism. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank were formed during the latter period of World War II to ostensibly rebuild Western Europe, which remained in the imperialist camp, even though there were efforts to move towards socialism in Greece and in some other states. But the reality is that the Cold War divided Europe. And after Europe was put back firmly within the imperialist camp under the domination of the United States, you had a situation there where the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank put a lot of focus on the African continent, beginning in the late 1960s. By the mid 1970s, they were wreaking havoc throughout Africa because the post-colonial states were still not genuinely independent. There were coups d'etats that were being carried out, for example, in Ghana in 1966. They had arranged for some type of IMF loan. This is during the latter months, actually, of the CPP administration under Nkrumah. Then after the overthrow of Nkrumah, which was facilitated and engineered by the United States Central Intelligence Agency and also the U.S. State Department, they were actually behind the whole situation, even though it was quite interesting that one top CIA official during that time period said that the Ghanaian military and the police thought they had overthrown the Ghana government, but in actuality, the whole operation was being run out of the United States Embassy in Accra by a man named Baines. So yes, this is what was going on, and that was true for Africa all across the continent. If you look at, for example, what happened in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Uganda, all these countries fell under the orbit of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, ostensibly to bring these states, post-colonial states, out of poverty and indebtedness. But what was the exchange? The economic recovery programs, the structural adjustment programs, slashed public funding, funding for education, higher education, social services, and it fostered a lot of migration out of these African states, and also the weakening of their national currencies and what appeared to be permanent downgrading of their currencies and economic underdevelopment. That started to change somewhat during the 2000s, but now we're back again to the real threat of huge African indebtedness and underdevelopment that's taking place right now. But the IMF and the World Bank played a extremely imperialistic and reactionary role on the continent during the 1980s, 1990s, and once again, people are going back to the IMF for loans. We saw that in Egypt. We've seen it in Zambia and other countries as well. So it's going to be a serious problem. The BRICS summit, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa Plus summit, has established a new development bank headed by Dilma Rousseff, who is the former president of the Republic of Brazil.
Yeah.
And their objective is to provide alternative sources of funding for development projects in Africa. But it's a very slow process. Recently, the Republic of South Africa, I read, had been granted $1 billion from this new development bank. But we'll have to see actually how this is utilized if it's going to foster genuine and qualitative development in Africa. But back to your question, the Union of Comoros as well has been impacted by the overall international system of finance, political and economic domination, which still is centered heavily in the U.S. and also in Western Europe.
In fact, the endless austerity and also just the viciousness of having these far right states which are backed by France basically take the orders of this French mercenary who is an agent of the French imperialists. It has been so. These policies have been so bad for the Comoros that Comoros has one of the highest rates of a diaspora, and are and so they have a huge brain drain, and then the huge diaspora, which often goes to France for a better life. Sometimes they go to Madagascar for a better life. These then impoverished people, because Comoros is so underdeveloped. I wouldn't say it's a backwards country, but it's so underdeveloped and has been led by such backwards people that so many of these poor farmers and whatnot are dependent on the uh, remittance of these
Expatriates,
Comoros
yeah.
diaspora folks. Many of them, and apparently, from the research I've done in France, a lot of these Comoros immigrants who have moved to France, a lot of them are based in Marseille, which I think is quite interesting in and of itself, because Marseille has quite a huge French post-colonial population. It has a huge Algerian population, huge Moroccan population, huge Black African population, and apparently many people from Comoros are also based there. And a lot of them mobilize solidarity work, and they have a very small left there, but a very small vocal left there that often mobilizes against French imperialism. And when there's other protests against French imperialism, oftentimes, that small left of Comoros left will often, protest against what France is doing in Comoros and in general the state of affairs, which I find quite interesting.
And that has happened too in Mayotte, the French department or the island there that is still under French colonial domination. There's been demonstrations there over the years related to events that are taking place in France. So it's quite interesting. And that's the same situation in the French Caribbean as well, states such as Martinique.
And going back
The
to
French Guiana, yeah.
and you've already been answering my question on whether Comoros has relations with BRICS or special relations with specific members. So Comoros has fairly good détente relations with Russia, but interestingly enough, now France, contrary to popular mythology, France was not an ally to the anti-apartheid struggle. France was actually an ally to apartheid South Africa, and apparently, can you talk about how France used Comoros as basically a proxy to help out South Africa when apartheid South Africa waged war in Mozambique, Angola, and elsewhere? Can you talk a bit more about that? Because I find that quite interesting. And what are the current relations between Comoros and neoliberal South Africa, which is now trying to under pressure, give more concessions to the majority working class and majority poor of South Africa? I'm very curious to respond.
Yes, I think that Bob Denard, the infamous French mercenary leader and manipulator, coordinated, a lot of that support, whether it was into Mozambique in support of the Mozambique National Resistance, which was an apartheid and earlier Rhodesian-backed so-called rebel organization that was there just to undermine the socialist-oriented post-colonial government of Frelimo, Mozambique Liberation Front in Mozambique. So that's important to recognize, and that they were definitely opposed to any semblance of majority rule in the Republic of South Africa or in Namibia. So they did not, under this domination, although covert domination, uh, uh, led and engineered by Bob Denard, did not support progressive policies in Southern Africa or in other parts of Africa as well. Even in the DRC, which now is a part of the Southern African Development Community, he was involved there as well, going all the way back to the early 1960s.
Interesting. My second to last question is this: what has been the Comoros under these under the current far right leadership? And it's funny because Azil, the current president of Comoros, I mean, on paper, his party is supposed to be left leaning, democratic, socialist, social democratic, and whatnot, but he's actually very repressive towards towards unions and anyone who's to the left of him, which I think is quite interesting. So what's been the response of Comoros since the anti-French African Spring that's been happening, led by Burkina Faso Captain Ibrahim Traore? I'm curious your response.
Yeah, well, there are people there who are for greater independence from French economic and political domination. That has surfaced in Mayate and in other parts of the Union of Comoros as well. So there's a lot of sympathy among the masses for the whole anti-French, anti-neo-colonial movement that's been personified by and large in the Alliance of Sahel states. That's Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. So they are leading the way in terms of pointing out the dangers of French neocolonialism. So I think that France is quite concerned that they lose control of Mayotte, and if the Union of Comoros becomes hostile towards French involvement, that they could lose more territory on the African continent. Nonetheless, there's a huge pushback on the part of France against these independence movements. For example, in the Alliance of Sahel states, they're having tremendous security issues. In Mali, for example, there's a Ukraine-backed and in all likelihood French-backed militia groups. The JNIM is perhaps the most violent and the best organized. That's the Jamaat al-Nusra Muslimin,
Mm-hmm.
and they have formed a partnership with the Azawad Liberation Front, which is a sectional, regional, autonomous seeking or independent seeking region of northern Mali. They have formed an alliance with the JNIM, which is backed by, the U.S. and France and Ukraine. It was recently brought out 2 years ago that they were to overthrow the Alliance of Sahel states. And why is this? Because the Alliance of Sahel states is being supported by the Russian Federation.
Okay, yeah.
They're providing military assistance, economic partnership, is backing these counter-revolutionary rebels. And that's caused a diplomatic breach between the Alliance of Sahel states and Ukraine. So people who have illusions that the war in Ukraine represents some type of democratic renewal or some type of liberation movement from what they describe as Russian, authoritarianism, imperialism, which is a misnomer in my view. Why then, if that is the case, then why are they supporting counter-revolutionary elements in West Africa, in the West African Sahel region, that are trying to prevent the Alliance of Sahel states from gaining stability and from expanding?
Yeah.
For example, if you look at what's going on in Senegal right now with the President Faye and the split between Faye and Sonko, the Pan-Africanist patriots movement there is split. So and what happened with President Faye is that when he came to office a little over 2 years ago, there was a mandate, in my view, to move further to the left, to move against France, and perhaps even join the AES. That did not happen. When Bassirou Faye came to power, the first foreign trip, is based on my understanding, was that he went to Paris. So he didn't go to the Alliance of Sahel States. So this has caused a split within the left in Senegal. And we'll have to see how that plays itself out. But yes, there's tremendous anti-French sentiment that is spreading across Africa. Nonetheless, France is not sitting still. They have attempted to break out of this apparent isolation in West Africa. And recently they went to Kenya to hold a French Africa summit, Africa Renewed, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And there was a demonstration by the Kenyan Communist Party, Marxist Kenya, which was treated with repression by the Kenyan government and police. So this is schemes that they're using. I understand that the president of Ghana, John Mahama, attended that summit in Nairobi. And also there's reports that Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of the Republic of South Africa, has made a trip or is preparing to make a trip to France at the invitation of President Emmanuel Macron. So these are very dangerous developments because France is by no means a friend of Africa. They have a long history of enslavement. They had one of the most prosperous slave colonies in Haiti during the late 18th century and early 19th century that had to be overthrown through a revolutionary uprising led by the Africans themselves, later led by Toussaint Louverture. Mm-hmm. And even after Haiti became an independent republic in 1804, they placed a blockade on Haiti for decades. Same situation involved the United States. They refused to even recognize Haiti between 1804 and 1862. It was only the U.S. Civil War and the necessity under Lincoln, as he saw it, to recruit African enslaved people into the Union Army, which turned the tide in 1862, 1863 against the Southern Confederates.
Interesting.
So the war that took place, the War of Independence in Haiti, so impoverished the French colonial and enslavement regime that they were forced to sell a huge section of the United States that they occupied, called Louisiana, to the United States under Jefferson.
Uh-huh.
And that's how they lost their territory to the U.S. Because of that war, African rebellion. And then in 1811, there was an attempt by Africans in the so-called German coast in Louisiana to stage a similar revolutionary uprising that had taken place in Haiti between 1791 and 1803. So France has been no partner, despite the rhetoric of assimilation and being supportive of democracy, harkening back to the slogans of the French Revolution during the late 1780s,
yes,
early 1790s.
Fraternity,
Liberty,
equality, and
fraternity.
Yeah. And liberté.
Yeah.
And liberté. Fraternity, equality, and then liberté. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But of course, that didn't last long. They still maintained slavery in Haiti. And even after that, they became huge colonial outposts. They set up huge colonial outposts. Algeria in 1830, for example, was taken over by France, and they stayed there until 1961, 1962. So yes, the Union of Comoros, they have a role to play in downgrading French colonial and neo-colonial authority on the African continent, and indeed throughout the world. Because we talked about earlier what they're doing in the South Pacific, what they're doing in other parts of Africa, what they're doing in the Caribbean as well. So they're seeking new avenues of exploitation and dominance throughout the entire global situation.
Well, actually, before I get to this last question, I did want to ask you this question, which is, can you talk about how you were talking about Haiti and how France uh with the help of the U.S. crippled Haiti after they overthrew French colonialism and and abolished slavery and basically did a huge economic a blockade on the country, which is one of the reasons why Haiti continues to be, very much impoverished country. Of course, recently this week, my friends at Capitalism Can't Be Fixed in Canada had two comrades on the program to talk about the Cuban embargo, what it was like back then, and what it's been currently like under the ghastly Trump administration. And so I want you to talk about how these small island nations, Britain continues to brutally exploit the Bahamas, the Cayman Islands, Jamaica, and Trinidad, and uses them as tax havens and tax avoidance schemes. And Haiti is still under a neo-colonial is still under the neo-colonial thumb of France, along with Canada and the United States. And then you have the Comoros Islands, which France, like New Caledonia, France continues to exploit them brutally. So I was wondering if you could talk about how the smaller the nation it seems to be, the more brutal and grotesque the colonial regime and the neo-colonial regime is. And of course, the U.S. also does that with Nicaragua, Honduras, and El Salvador and so forth. So I was wondering if you could talk about that and how Comoros is the perfect picture of just how brutal the Western imperialist order is, and why we need to do much more solidarity work in highlighting that and mobilizing against Western imperialism and, dare I even say, capitalism.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I have done research and written reports on the role of French imperialism in all of these geopolitical regions, because the misinformation that's circulated by France is that they are in support of independence, democracy, and freedom, which is not the case. That's not even the situation inside France itself. If you look at the last national elections in France, the largest block of votes that were cast were for the left coalition in France. Yet they were not able to appoint a prime minister, and they have not been able to hold general elections in France. Macron is still dominant inside the country. You also have extreme right-wing elements, neo-fascist elements. For example, the National Rally. They are still very strong as a political party, and they've tried to stop the leader of the National Rally from being eligible to run for the presidency. In fact,
Yeah.
there was just a hearing last week on that question. So this is what's going on. And the National Rally has sister organizations in other parts of Europe. For example, the Alternatives for Deutschland in Germany, which is a far-right anti-immigrant party. The Reform UK and Restore Britain parties, the English Defence League, all these groups are viciously anti-migrant, racist, and they you have those counterparts in France as well. Nonetheless, even the so-called moderates and centrists, which Macron represents, he had been at one time a member of the Socialist Party of France, but that party has been in steep decline. So has the Communist Party of France as well. But you do have the left bloc, which is still strong, but they're not able to remove the Macron administration. And the right wing is still on the rise in France, in Germany, as well as in the United Kingdom. So, yes, all of this is going on. And I think it's very important that people that are based in the West, follow all these developments in terms of the struggle against French neocolonialism and the rise of the right wing in France and other Western European countries, as well as here in the United States, because you have the MAGA uh, wing of the Republican Party, which is dominant right now. They control the Republican Party. Anybody that's considered a moderate Republican, and you don't hear about liberal Republicans. They used to hear about them as well. They really weren't liberal, but the name was circulated. You don't hear anything about them now. If you oppose Trump, that means you have really no place whatsoever in the U.S. Republican Party.
Yeah.
Uh, so this is the reality of the
Or, or,
situation.
or in general, because the MAGA Republicans, I mean, anybody who even, just anybody who disagrees with them, they, see as, the enemy.
Enemy, mortal enemies. I mean, they control the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. They control all three of those institutions. Plus, they control the U.S. Supreme Court in a 6-3 majority. So you can see the rightward thrust of imperialism, even further to the right, to the point of fascism. And that is the reality that oppressed people and working class people are dealing with right now in the United States. In Britain, for example, the Labour Party you had mentioned earlier has moved further to the right. And people like Andy Burnham, what is their politics actually? What is their position on Ukraine? What is their position on Palestine in terms of what they call welfare reform inside of Britain? There's a lot of pressure from the Tory party for the Labour Party to cut welfare benefits, which are in very abysmal situation as it is
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah, and the anti-immigrant bias that exists in the UK and the racist violence. We've seen it flare up just recently. Um, some violent incident that occurs, and these racists will take out their hatred against the people of color communities and the migrant communities in England and also in Northern Ireland as well. So that's the situation that oppressed people are facing throughout the entire capitalist world.
Yeah, and recently, before I get to this last question, just to add to what you were saying, is, recently, Reform Party led by Nigel Farage has, has sort of, has sort of tried to do this political calculation. He was under investigation of receiving apparently dodgy money, five
Five
thousand
billion
pounds.
pounds
Yeah, and he,
from a tech
called.
mogul. Yeah,
Yeah, and then called for a special election. None of the opponents wants to participate in this election except for a joke candidacy of Count Binface. And I do hope that the people of Clacton on Sea do support Count Binface. But in much more scarier news, though. So this might become a backlash, and this might, dampen Farage's chances of becoming the future prime minister of Britain, even though he remains one of the most popular politicians across the political spectrum. And
interestingly
recently,
enough.
And recently, boneheaded douchebag, over tattooed douchebag Joe Rogan recently had on his popular show. I mean, he gets views in the millions, and he does interviews. People complain about the length of my interviews. His interviews are over 4 hours to 6 hours long, and he recently had a guy who was too far right for even Reform UK, Rupert
Yes,
Lowe of Restore Britain, who came on his program to say,
I saw part of it.
yeah, to say the most insane, asinine, far right junk nonsense you can imagine. But Rogan platformed him, and in the beginning of the interview, he thanked Elon Musk and Jordan Peterson for arranging this interview, and just allowed this far right nut job to say the most insane things, which I think even the far right in England were like, "Whoa, dude."
Yeah, about gun control was one, because there was a massacre at a school several years ago, and he said there was one murder, and after that, his father had his guns taken away. That was the part they showed in on British television of this interview. So it was pretty bad situation. And Joe Rogan, he's pretty bizarre character. He calls himself the Joe Rogan Experience.
Yeah,
I mean, I've heard of the Jimi Hendrix Experience, but never the Joe Rogan Experience. I
I can
mean, it's
tell you,
outrageous.
and I can tell you, it's not a good experience.
No, it's not. It's not. And
But
yeah, he's on, and he was a big supporter of Donald Trump. But now with Trump involvement in Iran and other issues, he claims he was a critic of Trump. But then just a few weeks ago, he was at the White House standing right behind Trump in his famous chair in the Oval Office. So where does this guy really stand? He says he's critical of Trump and his war policy, but at the same time, he still goes to the White House when he's summoned by the Donald Trump White House. So it's a very, very interesting situation.
yeah, no,
And others too, I've been doing the same thing.
yeah, no, no. Joe Rogan is your typical, far right, libertarian. Uh, I think a douchebag, but he's managed to cultivate a huge audience because he'll interview
Yes, in social media.
yeah, and he'll interview people like David Lee Roth, Tommy Lee, all of these popular rock stars from the 1980s and the 1990s, and then sometimes he'll interview people of the left like Lee Camp, Abby Martin, and so forth, and then Matt Taibbi, Jimmy Dore, Russell Brand, all of whom who have actually embraced the far right and have gone more and more to the far right, which I think is an interesting, case study, in and of itself. But Rogan, lots of people, lots of leftists think that if I go on Joe Rogan's program, I'll be able to convert his often far right libertarian audience to our cause. That doesn't happen. And again, what often happens is those same people end up adopting all of these ridiculous far right views, whether it's transphobia, whether it's COVID denialism and COVID minimalism and anti, vax, extremism and so forth like that. So I personally don't believe in really engaging with, Joe Rogan and the libertarians of the world, but
Yeah, Tucker Carlson too is a good
but
example.
such is the pigheadedness of some of our anti-imperialist and left-leaning friends. But
Yeah, like Tucker Carlson, for example,
yeah,
who was at one point on CNN, then he went to Fox, and I guess
no,
they got rid of.
no. Then he went to MSNBC, and then he went to Fox News before going
Yeah,
semi-independent.
yeah. So now he says he's against the Trump administration's policy on Iran, which is a good thing. But if you look at his other politics, they're just as bad as they were before. And I think that these tech bros the ones, these multi-billionaires, and some say to be trillionaires, um, are promoting the fact that they control these social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and all of them. Uh, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that these right-wing pundits get so much attention, at least in terms of statistical profile of people who are watching and viewing their programs. I think the left has been largely shadow blocked. And, I know 10, 15 years ago, a lot of left-wing platforms, left-wing programs got a lot more attention, even through Google search engines, and what they have subsequent to that. So some people have been totally blocked out. We've seen, for example, on YouTube, they've shut down YouTube channels. They've shut down Facebook pages, Twitter pages, Instagram pages, particularly related to Palestinian solidarity movements and so forth. So I think it has a lot to do with the Elon Musk and the others
Well, in fact,
who own these platforms. Yeah.
I mean, last year when I was in preparation of a lot of our episodes on Africa,
Mhm.
I was using a lot of research using Chat GPT, and I was actually quite blown away by
Yeah.
the perspective it would relate back to me and so forth. And I even thought in myself like, wow, I actually should share some of this stuff and share
Yeah.
this with my fellow leftists and so forth, because this is actually really great, the Q&A. Now it's gone full, I wouldn't say far right, but it's definitely gone back to like the center right,
Yes.
part of the circle. And now when I use Google AI mode for research, it's one of the few places which still you can get, depending how you phrase your questioning,
Right.
you'll get a lot of interesting responses back. And then and then even alternatives to YouTube, like Rumble and Rockfin, these were supposed to be the places that the left should, abandon YouTube and go full speed ahead and embrace, Rockfin and Rumble. You can have your channels there, but when I, go there on, on the odd day, it's oversaturated, it's overpopulated with just far right,
Wow.
nonsense, from anti-vax extremism to transphobic stuff to Joe Rogan type of stuff, to people who are even more on the nuttier right than the Nigel Farage or a Tucker Carlson and so forth. And it's like, and then for me, it's like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. So it just goes to show you that yeah, that the left has. I know it's difficult, but the left has to step its game up. But it's even going to go to the point where I don't think the left will probably ever be able to uh, outnumber all of this far right content, especially because the Elon Musks of the world, they all make it in such a way that people will get way more far right junk journalism, then they'll get a 1+1, a capitalism can't be fixed, and Eve Angler. You and your friends with Sovereign Media, Black Agenda Report, and whatnot. So it's like we almost have to go like underground and try to find like more of an underground guerrilla way of getting our message out, because yeah, because
Yeah.
the way it
And
is.
Patreon, I don't know what you think about them. Patreon, Patreon. Uh,
I've never used Patreon,
okay.
but they're all dependent on the overlords of
Yeah, of the
of these
tech
far
world.
right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. And
I mean, PayPal. I encourage folks to do donate at the PayPal. PayPal was funded by Elon Musk, Pierre Omidyar, and all of these very dodgy, again, libertarians. These
yeah,
folks who supposedly are uh, fiscally conservative but socially liberal, but no, but you get the worst of both worlds with them as well. So
absolutely. You absolutely do. So, and they've been promoting, these far right political interests in Europe as well as in the United States under the guise of free speech. I mean, even J.D. Vance, who's the vice president of the United States, has criticized NATO countries and Western European governments for ostensibly censoring the far right.
Yeah, exactly. So these are very scary times, and Elon Musk withdrew his support for Reform UK, and now wants people to support the crazy guy that was on Bonehead,
Yeah,
Joe Rogan's
restore Britain.
program,
Yeah,
Restore Britain. So
yeah,
scary times,
it is.
and that means that the left has to mobilize, and we really do have to mobilize like hell, because with climate change happening, uh
Yeah,
the I don't know about you in Detroit. We're still having we're having another heat wave that's coming on, and right now our thoughts and prayers with our dear friends in Canada, because the wildfires that are going on there are absolutely out of control, and
and
apparently
the
many folks
smoke
have to really
is
stay
covering
indoors.
the smoke from the wildfires in Ontario has been covering Michigan, Detroit,
Oh
for the
wow.
last 3 days. Um, Yesterday it was so bad, a lot of people didn't even want to go outside, because you could smell smoke. It's like the smoke, it's like the fire is a block or 2 blocks from where you live. Yeah, that's how bad it is. And people are suffering, from respiratory problems and even losing their lives because they have particles in the smoke that can prevent people from breathing properly and can cause all types of respiratory illnesses. And that is even today, it's starting to clear up a little bit, but it's still very bad situation that's going on in Detroit. Yesterday, Detroit was rated as having the worst air quality of anywhere in the world. Now, I don't know if that's an exaggeration, but it is pretty bad because we're right here on the border with Canada. So this is what's going on around the world. And these people believe that climate change is a hoax, that
Yeah.
there's no such thing as climate change. So all they're interested in is making profits. And if they have to kill the earth, and eventually it's going to kill them as well, because where are you going to make your profits from if you wiped out huge sections of the population?
Exactly, exactly. And
They don't understand that.
that's the thing that actually baffles me the most about the climate change denialists. But even people like Mark Carney, the ruling liberal prime minister, his whole domestic policy is drill, baby, drill. Let's get all of those tar sands out of Alberta. Let's get them all out of BC. Let's get them all out of Quebec. And he is dedicated to reaching that 5% GDP target for militarism in NATO. And anybody who has seen Abby Martin's wonderful documentary, and I still encourage people to go get it, organize a screening, or the moment it's uploaded, do spend on the streaming, because it is worth it. And as she says, the military, the U.S. military, but I would say all of the militaries are Earth's greatest enemies. So we have to mobilize like
Yes.
hell against them.
So Trump is demanding that there's be more military expenditures for the NATO allies, and they're going right along with it. Unfortunately, even though their populations are becoming poor, like the situation in the UK, where young people, that doesn't appear to be any future for many of them in England. And they've talked about it, in the media, but they're still not willing to do anything about it.
Yes, and this is also why we have to mobilize against the stupid and foolish ideas some people have fallen for, that there needs to be an independent Europe from the U.S. and we need a European army, and we need no, we don't need more pan-European imperialism. We need to
No,
demilitarize. I don't know if degrowth is the answer. I do think it's the answer, but I think we should adopt degrowth or learn from what China is doing with their ecological social. But we need to demilitarize, and we need to keep all of those fossil fuels in the ground, and that's why we have to mobilize like hell. But
exactly.
Abayomi, final question before we wrap up. A final question on the Comoros that I want to ask you is the following. So, the Human Development Index ranks Comoros as a medium quarter life. And in spite of massive political instability, the numerous coups and so forth, Comoros has apparently the least amount of income inequality among its peers regionally. Yet poverty remains widespread in rural areas. And according to Wikipedia, between 2009 and 2014, about 19% of the population lived below the international poverty line of $1 and 90 cents a day by purchasing power to parity. So now, Comoros, if it wants to really eradicate poverty, radically improve social mobility, which you say is a little to non-existent, and more, uh, what's needed is more socialism. Comoros needs socialism, Pan-Africanist leftism, and whatever mistakes any left-leaning government did make in the past. What the island nation needs, though, is honestly socialism to truly address the intergenerational poverty and trauma that the country is still grappled with, correct?
I agree with that. And that's true for Africa as a whole, because these small countries such as the Union of Comoros, Seychelles, Mauritius, and others, they need to form unions with larger states, and there needs to be planned joint economic programs that are anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist. That's the only way these countries can dig themselves out of impoverishment. The poverty is going to continue as long as you have imperialist militarism and you have unequal methods of trade. All of this is going to continue into the unforeseeable future.
Well, we are joined on this edition of One Plus One, our All Things Africa edition, our Africa series, Journey Across the Continent, with Abayomi Azikiwe, historian, journalist, anti-imperialist, and racial and social justice campaigner, editor of Pan-African Newswire, and frequent contributor to Black Agenda Reports. Check out both outlets, subscribe to them, and donate generously to them, as well as Sovereign Media, which is a collective that Black Agenda Report is doing alongside our friends at Orinoco Tribune. And don't forget, folks, to donate to One Plus One. Help us overcome, as we were talking about, the far right algorithms, the pro-capitalist and pro-imperialist media that y'all are spoon-fed to. And don't forget to share us widely, because Facebook blocks me from sharing sometimes. So please do share. So please do share us widely. Help us grow our audience, and also do support Chris, the eclectic radical. Next week we will cover the Seychelles Islands. Join us for that. And also, before we close, rest in peace to the following: Sam Neill of Jurassic Park, David Clayton Thomas, famously of Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and who also had an incredible solo career, rest in peace. Brenda Fecker, Irish actress who got Best Supporting Actress for playing the late Christy Brown's loving supporting mother in My Left Foot alongside Daniel Day-Lewis. He also got an Oscar for that role. And folks ought to know her from Home Alone 2, Masterminds, and Angels in the Outfield, I believe, as well as How About You. Sadly, all these talented folks, may they all rest in peace, and they all gave us such gems. So again, rest in peace to all of them. And and also, folks who want to help the suffering people of Gaza and the ongoing Holocaust that Israel is inflicting on these people there and elsewhere. My comrade Fiona is still keeping her fundraising efforts open in memory of her, in memory of their mom, who, in their memory, she demanded that folks donate generously to the people of Gaza. So that fundraising efforts, they've reached their goal, but folks, please still donate generously to them, because it'll help with expenses, and any more extra relief that goes to the long-suffering people of Gaza, is important. So that's all, folks. All my best until then. Good night and good luck. And actually, just before we close, Abayomi, explain to people what's on your shirt. Show people your shirt before we close out.
Okay, this is put out by Motown Records. It's called their Black Forum series, and it kind of refutes the notion that Motown Records under Berry Gordy Jr. stayed away from civil rights, black liberation politics, which is false. So you have here Dr. Martin Luther King. This was an album, the first album that was put out by Dr. Martin Luther King. It covered his speech, I Have a Dream speech, which was delivered in Detroit 2 months before the I Have a Dream speech delivered in Washington, D.C., and it'll be the 63rd anniversary of that coming
Okay.
up
Okay.
next month.
Interesting.
Langston Hughes, a communist, black liberation artist and poet, playwright, novelist, and so forth. They put out a album of his poems. Elaine Brown, who was one of the early women Central Committee members of the Black Panther Party from Oakland, California. The album Seize the Time came out in 1969. Great album if people get a chance to listen to it. I think it's still on YouTube if they haven't taken it down. And this is Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture,
Yeah.
the actual founder of the Black Panther Party in Lowndes County, Alabama in 1965. His speech, Free Huey, at a Free Huey rally in February of 1968 in Oakland, California. So all of these recordings were issued by Motown Records starting in the late 60s and the early 1970s. And they did even more. So it's called Black Forum. So this t-shirt was put out by them. Motown was started here in the city of Detroit. And they're in the process now of reconstructing and expanding the Motown Museum around Hitsville, USA, which is on the west side of Detroit. So we're looking forward to the completion of the larger and improved Motown Museum.
Well, if I'm not traveling anywhere in October, we should organize me coming to visit you in Detroit, or maybe we do that sometime next year because that sounds like Detroit is the place to be, folks. It's
Yeah.
do not be too Detroit has, Detroit and places like Wisconsin have had very, very, very bad years with the deindustrialization and the
Yes.
outsourcing that the car manufacturers, the motorcycle manufacturers have made. But Detroit is still booming. Detroit is not a complete desolate waste house. Folks should still visit Detroit because it still is quite a lot of places to visit right in Detroit. Correct?
Yeah, but right now, with the forest fires in Canada and northern Minnesota, it is really, really bad. And hopefully it'll clear up. They said it may clear up by tomorrow, but it was extremely hot last week and this week. We're talking about, 34, 38, even up to 40 degrees Celsius, which is like in the upper 90s. The heat index is over 100 earlier this week. And then, of course, we got hit by all this smoke from Canada and northern Minnesota. So I wouldn't advise anybody to visit this week.
Yes, yes,
People,
exactly.
but there are people coming, you got conferences being held here and all kinds of things. So
And of
they have,
course, Dearborn is the center of West Asian leftist politics, Palestinian solidarity politics, Lebanese solidarity, whole West Asian solidarity politics as well. And yeah,
yeah,
we definitely
still
have to
interesting
organize me
place.
coming to visit Detroit in the future. So,
Okay, great.
but until then, folks, good night and good luck. Seychelles Islands. We'll be covering the Seychelles Islands next week. I'll see you. I'll see you all until then.